Please listen carefully.
Hello, and welcome back to the Extra Buttery Podcast. This time on the show, we're going to be talking about Arrested Development Season 5. Just been announced that the cast is getting back together for another season on Netflix. So we'll get into that, whether that bodes well for the show that the fans love so much, or whether there may be some pitfalls ahead. Then we'll talk about a couple of new releases that just premiered over the past couple of weeks, starting with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and then followed by King Arthur Legend of the Sword. The first one had a pretty solid opening, but the second one is already starting to look like the first major flop of the summer movie season, so we'll talk about both of those. Then we'll dig a little bit into the Power Rangers, which we talked about previously on the show, but it seems like the optimistic box office projections for that film and the series the studio wanted are not coming to fruition. So Jason will have a little bit to say about that. And then closing things out, we'll take another look at the upcoming summer movie season, and most specifically, Alien Covenant, which is set to come out this coming weekend. And we'll take a look over the season as a whole and figure out where this new Alien movie fits in. But coming to you from Toronto, my name is Robert Snow, and joining me from Vancouver is my co-host Jason Chen. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing all right, but let's get started with Arrested Development. Would you call yourself a fan of the original series when it was on TV?
Huge fan. It's one of the funniest TV shows I've ever seen.
Oh yeah, I'm with you.
And so I was one of those people who really was excited to come back. I think it was on Netflix, right?
It was like 2 years ago. They did, it led the charge with the whole Netflix originals thing. They did a season 4 after...
Right. This was like one of their biggest licenses that they had got. And it was so bad. I didn't finish it. I couldn't finish it because it was just like... The humor wasn't very good, and from what people have told me, the jokes kind of pay off if you stick through it. But I could never sit through till the end.
Yeah, no, I can sympathize with that. Like, I remember being really excited when Netflix got the permission to not reboot the series, but kind of kickstart it back to life. And yeah, the biggest thing for me was just that they had been delayed so long putting it together, partially because in the space of time since the show had been originally canceled, the stars of the show had gotten so
big.
Their careers had just they'd totally taken off. And it had become almost impossible to get all of them in a room together to do those big scenes that really made the original show so great. You can go through any number of articles about this, but really what killed the fourth season on Netflix was the fact that you couldn't get any of these actors to be all together in a room, getting their characters bouncing off each other and kind of, rekindling that chemistry that everyone loves so much about the original series.
That's fair. I don't think the writing was as strong, though.
I almost think that I don't know what the process was like, but it felt a little bit like the writing was informed by the fact that they knew they couldn't do the scenes the way they had done originally.
Yeah, which is to your point, and that's a fair point. But I just think, I don't even remember the plot itself, but I don't remember it being particularly memorable or funny. But I mean, I could quote like 10 things right now from the first 3 seasons, right?
How much clearer can I say? There's always money in the banana stand! No touching! No touching! No touching! No touching!
It's such a quirky, kind of like a punny show. Like I remember there being a lot of puns. Like maybe is a pun, right?
Yeah, and
maybe is really funny. Yeah,
and her who?
Yeah, and the Korean kid that they had living with them for a while.
What was his name? Anyang?
Yeah, Anyan. Because, apparently Anyan's, hello in his language in Korean or something, and they just assumed it was his name.
Yeah.
See, there was nothing like that in the Netflix series, so I'm a little wary about this one. I would be a lot more hyped had they not fallen flat on their face with Iron Fist.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen a lot of Netflix originals that were comedies. So I can't really say, but I mean, as always, I hope it's good, but I don't think it's going to be good.
Yeah, I mean, even in the space of time between the premiere of season 4 and now with this announcement that the new season's going to be available next year, 2018, it's not like the careers of Jason Bateman or Will Arnett or Portia de Rossi, like any of those folks, it's not like they've gotten any less busy, so...
Yeah, but I mean, if they really wanted to make it work, they can make it work.
You would hope so, yeah.
If the writing is good and has all the parts that they like, then it shouldn't be a problem putting them all together.
Because, I mean, last time they relied so heavily on blue screen kind of CGI effects, I mean...
Speaking of Netflix disasters, have you been keeping track of Bill Nye's new show?
I've been watching it. I think I got like 2 episodes left to go.
I watched the YouTube video of sex junk, and it's... the most awful thing I've ever seen. I couldn't finish it.
Yeah, because he got Rachel Bloom from My Crazy Ex-Girlfriend to do that segment.
Right, but it was just a terrible segment. And from what I've heard, the show is terrible. And Bill Nye, let's be honest, like Bill Nye has changed a lot since he first started on TV.
He has. Yeah, I'll agree with you.
I think there's a segment where he like answers Twitter questions or something like that on YouTube. Anyway, people ask him questions on Twitter and he answers them.
Yeah.
And he comes off as like super arrogant and obnoxious. And he was never like that in the show. Maybe he's just like sick of stupid questions, but he's totally changed.
Yeah, because I think in the years since the original like Bill Nye the Science Guy thing, I mean, in that show, that was very clearly a kid's show, but like we grew up with it, so... You know, we have this like major nostalgia for it.
It was a good show.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great show, and like you learn a lot from it even now, like going back and watching the old episodes. But I think one thing he struggled with is finding a tone that works for adults, because he did a show called The Eyes of Nye that was back on PBS in like maybe even 10 years ago, I think. And I feel like that also fell a little bit flat in the way that the new Netflix show has, because every so often he'll do his kind of classic Bill Nye. He has like this voice that he does when he's trying to be funny. And I feel like it works better with kid-oriented material than it does with adult-oriented material. And then when he really gets into the meat of what he's talking about, especially in the new show, like the first episode of the new show is all about climate change. And you can just feel that all of his pent-up emotion about...
He's an activist as well as a scientist, right?
Yeah, he's an activist. You know, like you can tell he's been doing a lot of hits on Fox News where he's been debating climate change deniers, and he's got a lot of pent-up anger about that.
Well, you know, that's his own fault. If you go on TV with Fox, you're just going to get angry.
Yeah.
Like, what else did you expect?
Yeah, so the first episode of the Netflix show really has that, and that I almost wanted to turn off after that because it just felt preachy.
He's very preachy. Sex Junk was awful though. Like the lyrics were crude and not even good and didn't rhyme, and the production value was awful.
Yeah, that's not the first segment that Rachel Bloom did for the show. She actually had another segment a few episodes previously where she was same kind of like dance routine, but she was talking about evolution of life on Earth and how life might have come like ridden down to Earth on a meteor. So, but it was basically the same kind of like, you know, Rachel Bloom does a crazy 1980s style dance routine kind of thing. And the lyrics were just as rough around the edges. Yeah,
it's just the lyrics and the music are just awful. Nothing against Rachel Bloom. I'm sure she made it as best as she could, given how terrible the material was.
I feel like just in general, that show has the structure is a little bit too rigid. Like they always go like, all right, let's do a correspondent in the field. All right, let's talk to the correspondent in the field. Now let's go over to our panel of experts. We'll talk to them for a little bit. Then we'll do like one experiment in the lab, quote unquote, which is nothing like the lab that everyone loves from the kids show in the 90s. And then we'll have like a musical interlude, or maybe we'll have like a basketball star come out and have a fun little moment with a kid with like a dunking with wires or something.
I was going to say like I've never known an adult that watched the old Bill Nye, the Science Guy episode and said, oh, this is for kids. Like, as long as something is good, I think you can draw both adults and kids. Yeah. Like, look how, like, even movies like Inside Out and Zootopia, I think adults loved it as much as kids.
Yeah.
And like what I loved most about Bill Nye's old show was his little experiments that he does on his lab bench.
Yeah, and like you can tell that he's getting really excited about it.
Like, screw the correspondence and what they think. Like, you just have dumb people showing up on air having like a 6-second clip.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's no point. Netflix, I feel like, has this problem where they feel like they really need to cram a lot of material. So Jessica Jones and Luke Cage went on for like 3 episodes too long.
Yeah.
Some shows obviously have different lengths because the stories are different. But I feel like Bill Nye's show is like perfect for those like a 15-20 minute segments.
Yeah.
And that's all you need. The science for adult show, there already is one. It's called Cosmos.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah.
And like, I mean, if you want to watch like nature and documentaries, I highly, highly, highly recommend Planet Earth.
Yep.
You'll learn so much, and it's so beautifully shot. I mean, and screw these science shows. I mean, go read a book instead, you know?
I think with Bill Nye, like, it's almost like he's stuck in an old school, like, news show kind of format where he's got to have the expert panel.
But not even a good old news show, right?
So there's a few hokey kind of segment style things. That's like, and now we're going to have a dance routine. And it's like, what is this, Ed Sullivan in the 1960s? Like, come on. So yeah, it didn't land the way I think they wanted it to. You
saw Guardians this weekend, didn't you? Or you did see Guardians?
I did, yeah. Well, I saw it the weekend it came out.
Did people clap afterwards?
Yeah, I think I like Toronto audiences are usually pretty good for that. They like to have a little bit of audible response.
You don't like that? I think it's pretty cool people do that.
I like it, yeah. Because when I was growing up on the east coast of Canada, people were almost absurdly polite at the end of movies, and there was like no.
That's just Canada for you.
I don't know. Like it was totally culturally different when I moved to Ontario.
Really? You got culture shock?
I wouldn't say culture shock, but there was a few little things that I noticed that were like, oh, okay, so people will actually like applaud at the end of the movie, even though it's not like the creators of the movie are around to hear the applause. They'll still do it. So that was kind of cool.
They didn't have that in Newfoundland?
No. They people would just like, all right, the credits go, and people would kind of watch them go up, or they'd start to file out of the theater, and that was it. You know?
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure why that was, but it was just sort of. Yeah.
You guys are just really hard to impress.
Maybe, yeah. You know, living in that windswept rock of a province. But no, like I saw Guardians. I had known going in that the critical consensus was pretty positive, but even on its own merits, one thing I really liked about it was how, you know, the first movie had spent so much time explaining why this gang of misfits had kind of banded together and decided to save the universe in the first place. And it was supposed to be this tale about people who shouldn't work well together but do. And then this movie kind of breaks down the team into these, it kind of pairs them off. So we've got Star-Lord and Ego, they kind of have a bunch of scenes together, just the two of them. Rocket and Yondu have a bunch of scenes together, just the two of them. Same thing with Gamora and Nebula. And then even Drax and Mantis. And they James Gunn uses his screenplay to separate them out and allow these like 2-person scenes to build up where they kind of hash out their issues, and you learn a lot more about the characters, and they can air out the stuff that's stressing them out, which seems a little bit cheesy for a Marvel film. But I think in the context of Guardians of the Galaxy specifically, it worked really well.
To that point, I think it kind of worked against the film as well, because I thought the plot kind of meandered. It kind of was a little bit all over the place. And this reminded me of Age of Ultron, when all the Avengers retreated back to...
Yes.
What's-his-face house? Jeremy Renner's house. And they have all this like exposition and character development. Except Guardians of the Galaxy did it like 100 times better. And in more creative ways. And I really appreciated actually having those relationships kind of explored and having them pair off. Because a lot of times it really developed the characters and showed you a lot more of like the Guardians of the Galaxy universe. So like Ego and Peter Quill, their kind of segment is very different from Gamora's, and it's very different from Rocket's. So I appreciated that part. Also, like, I kind of walked in like avoiding a lot of the trailers and TV spots because I didn't want to spoil it for myself. So I kind of had a suspicion that Kurt Russell was the main villain. When Brown showed up and he started going on about he was his dad and whatnot. But he didn't reveal himself as a villain until like midway through the movie. I think that caught people a little off guard. And I do agree that you can't introduce the main villain that late. Even though if you rewatch it again, and he's there at the beginning, he's in the first shot of the film, right?
Yeah.
But it just takes too long to get to the reveal.
Yeah, like they don't kind of reveal the context of him being a villain until late in the second act or beginning of the third act. And then when they do that, it's suddenly the movie goes from 0 to 60 and it's like, oh my God, now it's like an apocalyptic kind of climax type scene where Ego is using his like vaguely blue like world destroying goo to take over all these planets. And it's like, all right, now we're going to do this. And we're going to have like Ego's planet is falling apart. We're going to have a showdown in the center of the planet and boom, boom, boom. And it accelerates.
You didn't like the last sequence though?
I mean, in general, I was fine with it, but structurally it was a little bit sudden, I think. It's
pretty cliched and you can kind of figure out pretty early on that Kurt Russell was the villain. Right? So you sit through like a good portion of the movie just wondering like, okay, when is the reveal? All right, let's just move on. And I had even heard that there were scenes with the Nova Corps that were filmed.
Oh, yeah.
They were cut out for obviously time. But Elizabeth Debicki I thought was excellent again, as always.
Yeah.
Tom Clementieff as Mantis is really good. I think overall, like, it was still one of the best Marvel movies because it's so colorful and so bright. And the other thing I didn't expect is how emotional it was. Like, I didn't expect that at all. So kudos to Michael Rooker, who played Yondu.
Yeah.
His story and Peter Quill's. And the last quote he says to Quill, where he's like, I may not be your father, but I am your dad. I've always been your daddy. I love that line, and I thought he pulled it off. A lot of cameos from people I didn't know were in it, too. Like, I knew Stallone was in it.
Yeah.
But I didn't know, like, Michelle Yeoh was in it. And I think there's one other guy I'm forgetting. Two other guys I'm forgetting.
Yeah, the Ravager crew, he was in Pulp Fiction. Ving Rhames.
Ving Rhames, yes. And there's one more, I can't remember the name.
Apparently, no, Miley Cyrus did a voice for the, like, disembodied robot
Yes,
head.
I knew that, but it wasn't Miley Cyrus. It was an actor. I can't remember.
Anyways, yeah, they pull those kind of cameos together right at the end. But I like the point you made about how colorful the Guardians universe is, because you set that against the gray, kind of very stark.
Stark, I like how you use that.
Stark, exactly. In my review, I was like, Stark, ahem. It's appropriate because the Avenger stories that happen on Earth are kind of, they have that quality to them, but then all of a sudden in the Guardians universe we get these like pops of color, like the starship engines have this like rainbow fire coming out of them. Even they're like spitting out fireworks in that big scene towards the end. Like everything is just the palette is completely different. And I feel like between the Guardians films, Doctor Strange, Ant-Man to an extent, in some of like the scenes that quote 2001: A Space Odyssey, and then Thor Ragnarok. I mean, you can tell from Thor, the trailer for Thor Ragnarok, it's like this kind of cosmic color palette that I just kind of love. Like it calls back to the comics, and it's not ashamed of what it is, and it's so much more fun to look at.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. Oh, two things. So we were talking about how colorful it was. I was also shocked by how violent it was. The scene where they started executing, sorry, spoilers ahead, the part where they mutiny on the ship and start killing Yondu's supporters, and the part where they torture Groot was like pretty heavy stuff, man.
Yeah.
Like that's worse than any of the violent, quote unquote, violent fight scenes in Avengers or any of the other mainstream Marvel movies, right? Like outside of Logan, that's like the most heavy violence I've seen. I was so shocked.
Yeah, because the camera really does linger on all these bodies kind of floating out into space, and they've been...
Yeah, and like Groot's a freaking baby, and they're like freaking hazing him.
Yeah, they're hazing him. Although the one thing I did like though is they go a certain distance towards hazing him, and then they're like, no, but he's too cute. We just can't.
Yeah. But by that point, I was already like thinking it. You know?
Right. Yeah.
I could have lived without one or two of the extra credit scenes or post-credit scenes, but that's fine. There are plenty of Easter eggs to go around in that one.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they even did you catch the Jeff Goldblum one?
I did, yeah.
He was kind of he was just dancing to himself during the credits in one of the little inset bits, but I was like, oh yeah, you're going to be in Thor Ragnarok. I like that.
Look forward to Volume 3.
Yeah, but that's going to be post Phase 3, so we're going to it's going to be after all the Infinity War double film stuff, so we may be seeing Phase 3 with a new Captain America. There may be a new person in the Iron Man armor, so...
But I hope Volume 3 doesn't bring in all those other Marvel characters.
No, yeah. I think Guardians works best when they kind of allow it to be itself and kind of, we're out in space and doing our own thing.
So how is King Arthur? You know, Hollywood tries to keep Charlie Hunnam happening, but I think everyone's just kind of rejecting it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's his agent or if it's, I don't know what the story is there with Charlie Hunnam specifically, but interestingly enough, he's actually not the worst part about King Arthur, Legend of the Sword.
Who is?
I wouldn't say that actually any of the actors are bad, just that, if anything, when it comes to casting, it's a missed opportunity with Jude Law because... from the way the trailers depicted his character as this evil sorcerer who usurps the throne, I kind of hoped that he would have this totally campy performance where he would be totally mercurial, going between whispering and yelling, kind of like Eddie Redmayne in Jupiter Ascending. I mean, just have a listen to Redmayne's nutso performance.
My mother taught me what was necessary to rule in this universe.
By killing people?
I create life! And I destroy it. Life is an act of consumption.
So what I wanted from Law was a really memorable, wonky performance, in keeping with the overall gonzo kind of nature of the movie itself, but instead he plays it relatively straight, he's just a sorcerer, he's got some magic powers, and then he gets, spoiler alert, he gets defeated at the end. For the folks out there who haven't seen the trailer yet, here's a clip.
There are rumors, the legend of the sword, of a king other than yourself. Find him. I know your story. What kind of a man would you become had you inherited your father's kingdom instead of being raised in a brothel?
I would say the biggest problem with Legend of the Sword is just it's cut to death. You can feel Warner Brothers' grubby paws over the whole enterprise. This is the Warner Brothers of Suicide Squad at work. Not to totally absolve Guy Ritchie too, because I mean, who knows how much impact he had in the editing suite.
I was gonna say he made his name through editing.
Yeah, that's his thing. But I feel like maybe it was a perfect storm of a director whose style is defined by editing, combined with a studio who is so self-conscious about trying to get this a really saleable product that they can turn into a giant series. And as we saw with Suicide Squad, they made multiple versions of the movie. They cut it this way and that way, and they brought in a trailer house to totally change the tone of the film. And it feels like the same thing's on the go here, where they wanted to make a multi-film cinematic universe out of the King Arthur legend, and they tested it so many times and they re-edited it so many times that when you watch the final product, it just feels like, wait, okay, hang on, we got this scene, it's kind of cool, I'm kind of into it, but then we're cutting back to something else, and then we're on to something else again, and in and out, and flashes of various things that you could see yourself being interested in if you could just see the whole thing, just see it cut together traditionally, maybe with a bit of Guy Ritchie flair.
So what was the best part about the movie, though?
I would say the best part is just how willing Guy Ritchie and his team were to kind of reflect all the magic and the sword and sorcery stuff that comes out of the King Arthur legend. Like they, unlike Antoine Fuqua with his 2004 King Arthur film, you know, he tried to go in this very historical route where he was like, what if King Arthur was a Roman centurion? And what if...
That movie had big names, by the way. Like, it had a lot of big names.
It did, yeah. Yeah, it had and, like, you can go back...
Well, before they were big, right?
Before they were big, yeah. But, like, yeah, the cast there, the supporting cast, you know, they went on to have some really big roles. But Antoine Fuqua went in a really, like, in a historical... Granted, like, it was, you know, he was still making a lot of it up.
It was a horrible movie.
Yeah. But he was still trying to make a case for, like, what if King Arthur had been a real guy? This one is like, nope. We're going completely the other direction. We're going to have giant elephants. We're going to have giant snakes.
Awesome.
We're going to have Jude Law transform into like a hulking skull Grim Reaper thing.
Maybe awesome.
So like, yeah, all these great things. And when you're watching those moments by themselves, you're like, oh, this is really cool. Like this gets me into it. But then the movie is like, bzz, and it cuts into something else, or it doesn't allow you to really... It doesn't develop any of it, and you just feel like the way it couldn't have been shot that way.
Do you think Charlie Hunnam could ever be A-list?
Hard to say. I feel like if he got the right project, he could probably get up there. But I mean, I'm not against him right now.
But look how many chances he's had.
He has had a lot of chances. Yeah. Wait for his agent to come to him with like some Christian Bale caliber role where he has to like either gain or lose a bunch of weight and do it in 3 months and get an Oscar nomination out of it. Like if he gets something like that, then people might take him seriously.
Yeah, fair enough. I haven't seen it yet. I'm still looking forward to it.
Yeah, again, it really comes down to the editing. There's like the scene where King Arthur is supposed to go into basically like an underworld kind of place to learn how to use his sword. You can tell from the way it's shot that it was storyboarded out and shot so that you get to see the whole experience of him like being transported to this place and then getting knocked around and finally getting to this destination and activating the sword. But they're cutting to it at this just completely frenetic pace and you can't enjoy any of it.
Is this worse or is Civil War worse for editing?
This is worse than Civil War for editing, for sure.
Oh my God. No way. It's going to make me throw up.
Yeah, it's bad. It's really bad. There's this whole bit towards the end where like a giant snake is unleashed in Camelot and somehow like Jude Law's character teleports out of the throne room and is completely safe. And you have no idea how that happened. Like the throne room was destroyed by a giant snake and his character just pops up later on and you're like, how? Like we never see him get out of it. It feels like one of those kind of loose ends that can only happen from a really shoddy edit.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
And there's so many of those throughout the movie. So yeah, it's really too bad because the cast is there, the concept is there, but you can tell the Warner Brothers really wanted to build like this cinematic kingdom out of it. One of the biggest things that they really focus on is like, what if the sword Excalibur was like a superpower and like King Arthur was the Flash and could move really, really fast and like mow through 1,000 dudes and then
I'm sold. I want to see this movie, Rob.
Yeah, in a fraction of a second and then suddenly it's like boom, real time and he's like panting because he's out of breath and all these dudes are just totally killed, like totally laid out in front of him and all of his friends are like, whoa, he's really, really powerful. So they try to paint him as this superhero and you're like, okay, I get it. Like medieval superhero. Fine. You know, let's, you know, you can see where Warner Brothers is going. They're like, let's have a second film where it's all about Sir Lancelot and his magical power, or Sir Bedivere or Sir Gawain. You know, let's run through the list. But somehow with the box office receipts they've been getting, I don't think it's going to happen.
No. Speaking of box office receipts, Power Rangers.
Yeah.
The meat of our show this episode. So, where's it at now? Like 80 something?
Was it? Yeah, it was 80 something domestic, and then they were really hoping that the foreign box office would pick up. They figured like it would open in China, it would get a really big opening and justify the whole, like the really big series they had in mind. But I think it opened, like the opening weekend in China was like 3 million,
Yes,
whereas
something like that.
Guardians opened to like 60 million.
Right. And I have thoughts about that too. I'm pretty disappointed Power Rangers didn't get close to 100 like I thought it would, because like it's generally not a bad film. Like it's actually quite entertaining. I didn't buy for a second that this was like a 6-film franchise. Like it just doesn't have that quality. It doesn't have that fan base. But it easily could have been a trilogy. And it sucks that it didn't reach 100 million, because if it was a trilogy, the second movie could have been really good. Because they did a really good job of laying the foundation in the first movie and developing these characters. The other day, I was trying to explain Power Rangers to someone, and the best way I could come up with that Power Rangers is the film where, like, if you ever had to take a bunch of snotty teenagers to a theater to see this movie, you walked out thinking that it wasn't a huge waste of money and time, because it was a movie that was okay. And it was a movie that you'd rather these people watch than something like American Pie, like a spin-off, you know? There is some value to it. So in that sense, I think it was disappointing. The main point I kind of want to get to is that I don't think it should be all that surprising that Power Rangers bombed in China. I think we've already known this, but all these movies, they love the Chinese market, but the Chinese market doesn't like every single movie we kind of throw at them, right? I think in previous episodes, I was talking to you about how audiences in North America and China are different. The ones in Asia tend to be a little more fascinated or in all of the CGI that North America produces, because the domestic films they have can't come up with the same kind of quality and technology to do it. So out of curiosity, I checked on Wikipedia and I checked out the 10 highest grossing US films in China. The first one, of course, is the newest Fate of the Furious. That's no surprise, 2.65 billion. The second one is Furious 7. The third one, Age of Extinction, Transformers. 4, Zootopia. 5, Warcraft, which bombed domestically. But obviously, like, the game itself had a lot of followings in China, and it was a huge success. And I don't think at any point there was a doubt that it was made for an audience in China. But anyway, number 6 is Age of Ultron. Number 7, Jurassic World. Number 8, Avatar. Incidentally, also the only one released before 2011 in the top 10. Not counting Titanic 3D, which made a lot of money. Number 9 was Civil War. Number 10 was Great Wall. Although, like, I think Kong has surpassed it probably, or will surpass it.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But from all these 10 movies, I think you can conclusively say two things. A lot of these are CGI heavy. A lot of them are also either sequels or had a built-in fan base in China already. Now, even though Power Rangers was Japan, it was Asian, keep in mind that when it came out in the early mid-90s, like, the Chinese censorship was a lot worse than it is now.
Oh.
So even though Power Rangers is from Asia and a lot of people in Asia recognize it, the Chinese may not have the same familiarity with it. So for them, there's no built-in fan base for them. There's no people like me in China who grew up with Power Rangers. It's not like the CGI in Power Rangers was bad. I think in some points it was actually quite good. It wasn't at the scale of Avengers or Transformers. And maybe that was the part that they couldn't really sell the Chinese audience on, because the CGI suits and the CGI Zords don't even come up at like 3/4 or nearly towards the end of the movie. And I think had they marketed it like a Transformers type movie where it's about like robotic giant machines and CGI, I think it would have sold a lot better. And the other thing was the release date. I have no idea why the Chinese release date is this week when the movie came out like 2 months ago in North America. I think whatever buzz North America could generate was already dissipated stateside, so it never reached the other side of the globe.
Yeah, that is a bit of a weird marketing strategy, because, well, I think
most movies open in Asia first.
For almost all of like the recent ones, you know, they've opened in China almost, you know, within 2 weeks or something of the US release.
Yeah, or before, right? So I don't know why there is such a lag. I tried to look up films that had like such a difference in release dates, and I couldn't really find anything that was comparable. But do you know what the release date in Japan is, though? July 15th.
Oh, so they waited that long for it.
There's 2 more months to go before it's even released in Japan.
That's strange. Do you think that's got something to do with just the strategy on the part of Saban?
It may be because they want a big summer release in Japan. But like I said, whatever good buzz had been generated in North America would have already like been lost. Like you couldn't capitalize on the word of mouth. And I don't even know if word of mouth travels from like North America to Asia. But at some point, if enough people talk about Power Rangers, the other side of the globe is going to hear it, right?
Yeah, but they're really risking being buried by just the sheer volume of the other summer releases.
Yeah, and keep in mind, like Japan is quite similar to China in certain aspects in that their fan base now, their moviegoers now, are also very familiar with Captain America, Iron Man, Fast and the Furious. Like these characters are known to them as they are known to us. Whereas Power Rangers are going to have to dig a little deeper in the past. And keep in mind, like I said before, like pulp culture in North America is a weird thing. You don't at all have the same sort of like collective memory, some sort of like social identity associated with it. I think there are like blogs and websites dedicated to this stuff, but they don't have, I think, the same conversations about the impact of it on broader society.
Okay, yeah.
So it's not that surprising, like it did so poorly in China, especially Guardians of the Galaxy. Like it's probably going to be on the top 10 soon, you know? But I do think we probably overestimated how impactful the movie was going to be. That's for sure.
Yeah, so do you think Saban, it's a major miscalculation on their part because they banked too hard on having the Chinese market pick it up and guarantee them this big series they wanted?
I think so, and I also just don't understand why the release dates are so far apart. I did look up the old Power Rangers, the first one from like 95, I believe it was. Only, I think around like 55% of its entire gross was domestic. So it had a huge international gross as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, so there is maybe to a point that Power Rangers did have a strong international potential. Maybe it just hasn't been realized. We won't know until Japan actually opens. And I think that's like the big marker. Like how it does in Japan, I think will indicate how well that franchise will do in the future, if we're going to get a sequel or not.
Right.
But I'm not optimistic at all. Keep in mind the 95 Power Rangers, the CGI was horrific. It was awful, even for those standards. So like maybe because it didn't sell well, the CGI wasn't good enough. It just didn't take with the international audience. Like keep in mind, like the Japanese have a lot of pride in their stuff. They really put themselves at a pretty high standard. And the Chinese moviegoers, they demand quality as well, right?
Right.
I mean, it's really unfortunate. I wish we had gotten a sequel. I wish we had gotten a trilogy, actually, because, you know, whatever. But it looks like Ludi Lin's caught on to a new franchise already, signing up for Aquaman. So they're already on their big separate superstar paths.
Yeah, he's taking the recognition he got, and he's like, all right, time to build that career. Whether the DC universe continues will kind of fall to Wonder Woman and Justice League because they're still looking for a director for The Flash, and you know Aquaman doesn't seem to have started shooting yet,
But it feels more together than The Flash or the Cyborg movie, if we're even gonna get one. At least it feels like Aquaman's coming together rather than falling apart. Like I feel like it's more ahead than the Batman.
Yeah, they'll probably get those out before the Batman, whenever that is. It is kind of, thinking back now, especially in the light of what's happened with like King Arthur being the flop that it looks like it's going to be, Power Rangers not performing the way people expected, you know, and these giant franchises that were pinned on the hopes of these initial movies doing well. I mean, what does that say for the DC extended universe? Could we see a future where the DCEU is actually trimmed back in the same way because people just get tired of poor performing movies? It's
been a really hard time for reboots, right? Everyone's sick of them. So Power Rangers was a reboot, and it was an origin story. And those, I think, don't tend to sell well to audiences outside of North America because I don't know if they see character journeys and plot structure the same way we do. I will say, though, like, I forgot to mention this earlier, but when I sat down for my Guardians of the Galaxy screening, we got the full Spider-Man trailer. And I just want to say I hate you, Marvel, for revealing the entire plot of the movie.
Okay, yeah.
Because I can tell you exactly right now what happens, the main gist of it. And I wish I didn't know. And I wish we had like blinders and like earplugs on so there's certain trailers we can't see. Because it totally ruined Homecoming. I know what happens.
Yeah, even I think I remember seeing one of the full trailers like a month ago, and I had a pretty good idea the thrust of the movie. Like,
yeah, like Spider-Man has to earn his suit. Okay, great, we got it.
He earns his suit. Yeah, that's the driving force, and then it kind of culminates with what looks like a big climactic scene with that boat being cut in half.
No, I would say that boat being cut in half is in the middle.
Oh, okay.
Because that's when Iron Man takes away his suit.
Oh, yeah, good point.
And see, Peter Parker says, you know what? Screw you, Tony Stark. I'm going to prove this to you and myself. So he makes his own little weird, blue and red suit. I think he wears the old one he has. And then he goes mano a mano with the Vulture, even though Tony Stark says, no, you can't do this. So I think at the end of the movie, he kind of gets his suit back and he becomes a full-time member of the Avengers, and that sets him up for Infinity War.
Yep. Got to get them in place.
Yeah, the only thing I wasn't sure about was how the Shocker plays into the movie.
No, but it's a good point, though. Like, the trailer does give a lot of it away.
Gives too much. I hate it. Oh. Rob, call them up and just be like, yo, get your shit together and cut out this crap.
And you know what it reminds me of, too? Like, now that we're in this weird era where these big tentpole movies are not the surefire successes that we might expect them to be, it reminds me of, it was like some speeches that George Lucas and Steven Spielberg gave a few years back, where they essentially went on record saying, like, we're looking ahead based on our experience as blockbuster filmmakers. We're thinking that the failure of the big studio model, that the one that's hinged on these giant films, keeping franchises running, that could fail, and the whole industry might be turned on its head.
I've heard that too, but they've always managed to survive. Like, something else will take its place.
Yeah, very possibly. But I remember at the time what they were saying sounded kind of ludicrous, because we were right in the glory days of Marvel or even DC. Like, DC had just released Man of Steel at that point, and they hadn't delivered Batman v Superman or Suicide Squad. And I think a few people discounted what Lucas and Spielberg said, because they were like, oh, you guys are just part of the old guard. You know, you don't know how this superhero thing is going to pan out.
I think those people were delusional to begin with, the people who thought this would go on forever. Because no genre goes on forever.
Exactly, yeah. Like, when do we get to the point where the superhero genre becomes like the Westerns of, like, the 1970s, when they were still...
Yeah, we've talked about this before, but in other formats. Like, we talked about how Bourne was a tired franchise. Hunger Games and the young adult fiction is a tired franchise.
Yeah, the dystopian young adult fiction thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I've mentioned this before, but I would expect by the time Captain Marvel and those films hit theaters, the wave will probably be either on the downside or over. Nothing against Brie Larson or that movie.
No, yeah.
But I just think it's too far down the road. Are we getting a Black Panther movie?
Yep. Ryan Coogler from Creed is going to direct.
Right. So after that wave, probably, I think after Infinity War is done, anything after that just is kind of like either people aren't interested because the Infinity Gauntlet plot is over, and the ones that will be remaining are the ones who like this sort of film. And there's a market for that. It just won't be as big. And I do think there's a part of me that wants this pullback, because I think spending $1 billion to make a single movie or two movies is frankly fucking ridiculous.
Yeah. It's reached a pretty absurd.
Yes, we are getting to a point of oversaturation. I saw this. I was watching this trailer about a Russian film. It's going to be released in Russia about like people who have like superpowers and can like transform into other animals. And it's kind of like...
is this the movie called Just Guardians?
Or something like that. And so it's like it's spread all over the world.
There's a bear man with a Gatling gun.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I'm sure it's great. You know, I'm like actually kind of curious about it. But we are getting to the point where it's just too much. And I'm usually like right off the bandwagon before anyone else too. So like the superhero fatigue for me is real. Like if it's not a character I'm particularly intrigued by, I just don't care.
Well, I think that's why what we were talking about before with Guardians, like this cosmic, super colorful color palette, that's really the only thing, like just as a bit of a visual snob, you know, I work in the industry to an extent, so to me, that's the only thing that's really keeping me interested in what Marvel's doing. Like, if they had continued with the visuals, the cinematography from Civil War, I probably would have gotten to the point where I would actually start ignoring the movies when they started coming to theaters.
Civil War and Age of Ultron really weren't good, huh? Like, the more you think about it and the more you watch it, you're just like, I can't believe I bought into this crap.
Like, even if the movies were on sale, like the Blu-rays in a store, I wouldn't add them to my collection.
Yeah, I don't
know. Now Guardians I would.
Yeah, I already have that. The first one, not the second one, but I will be getting the second.
Any of those movies that have that extra bit of kick, that bit of life to them, those I'll buy, those I'll watch again.
Even Doctor Strange, I thought was kind of boring. Pretty sure I started daydreaming midway through the movie.
But at least it had those moments where those crazy, the scene where the Ancient One kind of sends him back through the dimensions for the first time.
Oh yeah, I mean, they're still very well made. There's a lot of production value, and it's really cool to see this stuff on screen. But like my mom said, you kind of seen everything already.
It's the same hero's journey kind of thing. The same activate your powers and get responsibility. You know. So yeah, that kind of, I think that works as a pretty good setup for the Marvel films, and I guess the DC films for the summer. So all that really leaves us is the Alien movie, which is set to come out the weekend this episode is dropping. Now, I know you're a lot more familiar with Alien than I am. The only one I've really seen through and through is Prometheus.
I was just thinking that I have to watch Prometheus again before I go see Covenant, because I barely remember anything about Prometheus. I was watching a clip today about how they woke up the engineer in Prometheus, and I completely forgot about that scene. I completely forgot that had happened.
Yeah, because that's the third act kind of thing. Like, they wake him up and then they use his body to kind of incubate the xenomorph.
That comes before.
Does it? Because I thought they woke him up and then the xenomorph embeds itself in him and in his chest, and then he becomes the first chest burster.
I thought, what's her name again? Elizabeth Shaw. So her and Holloway have sex and she gets impregnated with him. Then they meet the engineer. Then she gives birth to the xenomorph, doesn't it? Isn't that the sequence? Or did she give birth to the xenomorph before finding the engineer? It must be after the engineer.
Yeah, because she uses that auto dock thing to take the xenomorph out of her, and then it kind of it survives in the medical bay for a few scenes, and then it kind of takes over the engineer, kills the engineer, and then it uses the engineer's body to get to its next level of evolution.
Oh, yeah. See, I don't remember any of this stuff.
I'm surprised that I even do.
I have to, refresh myself with the philosophy and the mythology of the alien universe. I think it would help a lot in this Covenant, in this upcoming one.
Yeah, I gotta hand it to Ridley Scott, though, because these little prequel films they've put together and just released for free on YouTube, they seem to do a lot to kind of flesh out the background behind the film. There's this longish short film that introduces you to the characters of the ship that form the main cast. And then there's also this bit between Michael Fassbender as...
Walter.
Was it Walter? Okay. Michael Fassbender as his character from Prometheus, and Noomi Rapace as Elizabeth Shaw again. And it's a scene that takes place in the years after Prometheus when they're traveling to the planet that's featured in Covenant. And there's this really interesting bit where... Elizabeth Shaw spends all this time fixing his head into place because his head was ripped off during the events of Prometheus, and he ends up putting her into cryosleep and then kind of taking over the engineer vessel, and then they arrive on the planet, and it looks like the planet is civilized by the engineers. There's there's a whole city of engineers waiting for them. And there's this kind of creepy bit where the film kind of cuts off and Fassbender's looking down on this city of engineers. And the implication is like, yeah, he's going to wipe them all out. And that's when the cast from Covenant comes in. So yeah, there's some interesting background there.
I'm curious to how it ties into Elizabeth Shaw's character in the first movie.
Yeah, because I think the crew from the Covenant arrive and they're kind of retracing Elizabeth Shaw's steps. So then this short film does a lot to kind of fill in a few gaps.
The early buzz is that this is like a pretty terrifying and generally well-crafted film, except that the script and its characters leave too much exposition time. Yeah, it's kind of those sci-fi movies where you actually have to sit down and explain things. I think sci-fi has that. It's like a permanent trap. Post-apocalyptic, I think you can get away with because it's still set on Earth, but you're set on a spaceship and like on another planet. I think you do have to sit down and kind of like refresh the plot and everyone's motivations again. The key is just to not overdo it, right?
Right. Yeah, because there's a balance to be struck with the amount of certainly the amount of exposition that you try to fit into dialogue, because that's when it gets really obvious. The other ways to do it is have some news reports from Earth about the ship leaving the planet, and there's a few ways to do it from a screenwriting thing. Or if you really want to challenge the audience, you can just do none of that and just let them figure it out. But that doesn't always make for the most mainstream movie. It's kind of it's a catch-22 that way.
What are you expecting out of this movie, though?
If the buzz is to be believed, it's going to do pretty well. It's going to capture a lot of the folks who are longtime fans and might bring in a few casual fans. And from what Ridley Scott has been saying in the press junket, he's interested in doing a new Alien film every 2 or 3 years until he kicks the bucket, essentially.
That's not going to happen.
No, but that's the way he's talking. He says he's indicated that he's got 5 or 6 more Alien films in him, and he'll do them alternating between Alien and then his, the other stuff that he likes to do. He
is a really good world builder, but maybe he wants to do other projects in the meantime.
Well, you would hope so, because I certainly don't want the man's in his, what is he, in his late 70s now? I don't want the last few years of his career to just be Alien all the time.
It would be a good way to retire.
I suppose, yeah, but I mean, come on, give us a few more of The Martian or something. Geez. But yeah, I think that about does it for this episode. We'll definitely be posting a review of Alien Covenant when it comes out. I'll probably subject myself to that. I'll spare Jason the horror. And keep an eye out for that. And from Toronto, my name is Robert Snow.
And from Vancouver, I'm Jason Chen. Be sure to check out kinetoscope.ca for Rob's review of King Arthur. And we'll talk to you next time.